Before we begin, I have one thing to get off my chest. You can take away my house, all my tricks and toys. One thing you can't take away? I am
iconic.
It's a brand new
Did you hate that? Well, you may hate this next bit even more when I tell you I did not entirely hate Ironheart. I have very mixed feelings about this series, and we're going to get into it in just a moment. So welcome into my review of the Ironheart series. I like to break down my reviews into categories so I could dive into what works and what doesn't for me. We're going to go through the story, the music, the characters. Just know that starting now, we are in spoiler territory. All right, it is about that time. So we'll get into some of the specifics when we talk about the characters, but in terms of the overall story, it's pretty lackluster, I'll be honest. It's one of those Marvel shows that don't really get interesting until the final 2 episodes, and then at that point, where it hooks you, it gets you interested, that's when it's done. And there's been a trend here with these shows, right? You know, in this one, Mephisto shows up, show's over. Kingpin shows up in Hawkeye, show's over. He Who Remains shows up in Loki, show's over. It's like these shows are designed to sell the idea of cool things happening rather than, you know, actually doing some cool stuff. So it's one of those shows for sure. The plot here isn't very complex, and honestly, the most compelling parts are Riri's reaction to the chaos instead of the chaos itself, which is something we're going to touch on when we talk about Riri a little bit later. But moving on, I want to quickly mention the music. Just like I did in my Thunderbolts review, I want to point out the music, because music, when it's good, it's damn good. And Dara Taylor absolutely cooked with the score of this series. No notes, pun intended. All right, I highly recommend checking out the soundtrack, especially Riri's theme and Make My Millennium. I think those are 2 of my favorites. Overall, great music in this series. Go check it out. All right, let's move on to the characters. We're going to start off with Zelma Stanton, and I believe she's one of the highlights of the show. She wasn't in much, but definitely a highlight. I love how she's casual with the magic. It's almost to an irresponsible degree, which makes me love it even more. You know, she's funny, she's laid back, dangerously reckless, and that's the exact kind of energy I would love to see in the Strange Academy series, if they ever make it. I don't know if it's still happening. I don't know if they're going to turn it into a movie. I don't know. I've been hearing so many different things about that. But if they ever make something similar to that, I want Zelma in it, and I think she's going to be a good part of it. But like I said, she's not in too much of the show, so there's not much to say. But from what I saw, I liked a lot. Next up, we have Ezekiel Stane. Dude, I was jumping on my couch. I was not spoiled on this, thankfully. When they did that reveal, I said, there's no fucking way they're doing this. And then they did it. I said, oh, this is cool. He's another highlight of the show. He is possibly the MVP of the show. The moment he showed up, the energy shifted, and he's like the one reasonable character in the show. Like, he does not put up with Riri's bullshit. I'm telling you, this dude could have carried the entire series on his back if we wanted to. Give this dude a spin-off, have him, team him up with War Machine, do Armor Wars, Stane versus War Machine. Let's fucking go. Who am I kidding? They're not making Armor Wars anymore. Oh, man. All right, I gotta snap out of this. Back to Ezekiel. I need this man back as soon as possible. He reminds me a lot of Deathlock in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which, by the way, my Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. peeps, rise up. I still see you. Fantastic show. You know, it's like Deathlock, where I would like to see him pop up from time to time, you know, throwing a wrench into the plot for a bit, causing a bit of chaos, and then going away for a while, and then coming back and doing the same thing. I would love to see Ezekiel Stane be that type of character. But overall, man, fantastic addition to the show, possibly the best. Now let's talk about Parker Robbins, aka The Hood. First things first, I like Anthony Ramos. I'm a Hamilton guy. I want to root for him. I got to root for him. But this show doesn't really give enough material for him to work with until it's too late. Literally, they don't give him material that's significant until the last part of the show. And by the time they start adding this depth to his character, The show's already almost over, and you're like, cool, but where was this 3 episodes ago when you're establishing him? I don't get it. However, the post-credit scene where he links up with Zelma, I like that a lot. That could be a very fun thing to explore, but of course, that's a tease for a future project, not this one. So this show can't get points on my excitement for something that's happening later. All I'm saying right now is I do like the character. I'm happy he finally has some depth. I'm excited to see with that depth now where they take him moving forward. Next up, we got Raw's Blood, Jeri Blood, Slug, and Clown. And there's a very specific reason why I'm grouping this whole gang together and not individually. Because this team is a walking trope. You've seen all of these characters before. You got the hacker, the muscle, the getaway specialist. This show gives you no real reason to care about any of them other than the show itself basically telling you, hey, these characters are in the show. So you want to care about them now because they're in the show? Sorry, brother. That's not how this works. I did not care for these characters and was bored every time they did one of the scenes where I have to talk about whatever job they're going to do next. And also, this is a weird one. They had this subplot between Clown and Zeke Stane. Or, sorry, I shouldn't even say between them because they didn't even explore it between the characters, really. It was just a subplot about Clown and Zeke Stane that goes absolutely nowhere. It only exists for one singular fake out moment where Clown almost tells Parker that Zeke didn't actually kill Riri, but then Clown also omits that Riri is still alive, so she doesn't actually out him. It was literally just for that 5-second moment where they're expecting you to put your hand over your mouth and gasp and say, oh no, is she gonna tell him? And like, that's it. There's no romance, there's no character development between the two. It was so weird. It was literally just for that fake out that like wasn't even a good fake out to begin with because it's relying on a character that you don't even care about. It was so weird to me. Something that's also weird, let's move on to another character, Stuart Clarke, aka Rampage. I'll give him that respect. I'll call him Rampage. Nobody else wants to call him Rampage. I'll call him Rampage. Played by Eric Andre. And when he was in the show, the rest of the team, the rest of the gang, the rest of Parker's gang almost had a pulse. So he's only in the beginning because he gets fired from the group so Riri can later join. But while he's there, he single-handedly injects energy into all of the scenes he's in. I'm not even talking about the character. I'm talking about the actor, Eric Andre. Him being present feels like he forces the others to show some personality. That's the only time I found the rest of the group entertaining was at the start of the show when they're just ragging on Eric Andre. After he gets killed off, that's where they get into just being a trope. They're just there to be exposition vehicles. In those few moments where Eric Andre was in this show, he was ripping personality and entertainment from the rest of the group. And surprise, surprise, they killed him off. Oh, brother. And I'm not just talking about brothers. I'm talking about sisters as well, and I'm talking about mothers. Let's go over to Ronnie Williams, the mom that you specifically would want if you're planning to commit some felonies, okay? Because she figures out that Riri is into some shady business almost immediately. She picks up on every single clue, but never really does anything about it. Like the cops knock on the door about a dead coworker. She confronts Riri about it. Riri deflects. She storms off. Then we just reset until the next clue pops up. And then we just continue that loop. And then when she does start to learn what's going on, she's like, Riri, we can't run. You have to fight. What? Brother, she is a college dropout dealing with an unknown magical villain with a quest for revenge specifically targeted for your daughter. What do you mean fight? Considering everything that happens in this show and her daughter being in incredible danger, she's relatively pretty chill about all this. All right, let's move on to John. And there's not much to say, but that's not necessarily a bad thing in this context. He played his role as Parker's loyal right-hand man and added some moral tension early on. Now, his addition is actually pretty good, especially when you consider Like I mentioned when we were talking about Parker, he didn't really get any character development or layers added on until the very end of the show. So with John, when he's here for the first part of the show, when they were not giving Parker actual character development, John was the one who gave him sort of like second-hand development. So his inclusion, I think, was pretty good. I like the actor too. Overall, pretty good. Now let's move on to NATALIE. This was the best part of the show, hands down. I said, put your hands down. She was energetic and funny, but also I can understand why some people would find her just flat out annoying. I could definitely see that. Me personally though, I liked her a lot. And similar to Eric Andre, the actress for NATALIE brought the best out of everyone that she shared screen with. She really bumped up the dynamic, buffed up the energy in every scene. And I'll be real honest with you. I think her storyline with the whole AI stuff could have been the entire show, and that would have made the show excellent. Don't believe me? Hold on, let's go on a little quick tangent. Allow me to pitch you a rewrite of sorts. Let's say that Riri still accidentally creates an AI version of her late friend NATALIE. However, instead of it being a side plot, let's make it the central conflict of the show. Let's say that everyone around Riri starts interacting with NATALIE, and they begin asking her to build similar AIs for their lost loved ones, kind of like what Riri's mom did, but expand it to more characters and do it from the start of the show. Then suddenly, Riri is facing a moral dilemma. Should she bring people back? Should she profit from this? And all of this is happening while Riri herself is processing how she feels about it. And meanwhile, Parker and his group are off doing their jobs just like they were, completely unrelated to Riri this time. And during one of these jobs, John still dies. Later, someone in the gang mentions that they learned about NATALIE, and Parker begins to hunt down Riri so he can ask her to make an AI of John. Then, just like in the actual series, when Riri mixes magic with tech, just as NATALIE disappears, that's when the AI of John disappears. And that's when Parker goes irate, he blames Riri, that's where you cut to the conflict, cut to the fight that they still have at the end of the series. The same events happen, but in a more engaging context. I'm not saying this version is what they should have done. I've never been paid to write a television show. I mean, unless this video goes viral, then technically I guess I have retroactively. But the point is, I didn't really like the plot of this show, and I didn't just want to come here and complain about it and that's it. I wanted to try to also offer an alternative, and this is one that was clear to me very early on while watching the show, that they could have focused more so on a different plot line they had, and the show could have been very interesting, especially how they treat Ronnie Williams and how she deals with certain things. It would be very interesting if the show focused heavily on the whole AI stuff. Because forget making an Iron Man suit. If you're making one-to-one exact replicas of AIs of actual people, dude, imagine the demand for that. It would be very interesting to see how Riri would navigate those waters. It would be crazy to watch. I think that would have been a great show to watch. But instead, we gotta spend half the show going on these jobs to allow Parker to go invisible, to have people sign contracts so that they could do a takeover of their companies, even though what's stopping these CEOs from, going to the police and then later going to court the day after and saying, yeah, I signed this contract, but I was under distress, meaning this contract that I signed is null and void now. But I don't know. Let me know what you think of my pitch. But let's move on to Riri. Now, there's been some discourse going around where people are saying that Riri in the show is not a superhero. She's a supervillain. And I'll be honest with you, brother. I agree. And that's part of what makes this show feel so different from your usual Marvel series that I mentioned a bit earlier. She is not the traditional superhero. She does not deal with things the same way. She does not make the same decisions. Now, we've got two options here, okay? Option one is that this was very much intentional, as in the writers wanted Riri to be morally questionable. We're not supposed to cheer her on every step of the way. We're supposed to analyze her, understand her, maybe even disagree with some of her choices. That's a bold direction. That's interesting. But we could also have option 2, where this wasn't entirely intentional, where the intention was to have the audience support Riri 100% of the time. But if that's the case, yikes. Because Riri makes terrible decisions over and over and over again with little to no growth at all. Even down to the last frame of this show, there's like no growth in that department. And she also seems to carry this quiet resentment towards Tony Stark. It's not like a loud resentment. She only talks about it like maybe twice in the show, but it's there, right? She sees him as somebody who has had every advantage while she has had to claw her way to the same achievements. Okay, let's unpack that. Let me hit you with another option 1 versus option 2 scenario. Let's start with option 1. Tony Stark was privileged and Riri Williams was not. Okay, sure. Tony Stark was privileged. He got grandfathered into a juggernaut of a company made by his father, and he used some of the scraps of those multi-million-dollar weapons from his company in order to build the first Iron Man suit. But let's not forget the fact that he built that suit in a cave with a box of scraps. Sure, those scraps were his, but he was in a cave by himself. At the time, he was just a guy with his intellect and the desperation to make something happen. Riri isn't that far removed from that. If anything, she's starting at a higher tier. She had access to MIT, to Wakandan tech, and she was able to build a solar-powered Iron Man suit by her early 20s. If we're looking at everything, even if we're gonna say that Riri Williams was not privileged, that is a tough case to present. Now let's move on to option 2. Tony Stark is just more privileged than Riri Williams. This one also doesn't make much sense to me. Like I said, she was at MIT. Not only that, she's been at MIT long enough to have her grant expire. She was going to MIT for over 4 years. The dean was customizing coursework just for Riri. She's already built a suit. She's been to Wakanda. She's on a first name basis with Princess Shuri, who is the new Black Panther, by the way. And on top of all of that, just like I mentioned a second ago, she powered her entire suit using solar energy. She created an unlimited power source for her suit. That sounds very familiar. Do you remember the first Avengers movie? When Tony Stark and Pepper Potts created an unlimited power source for Stark Tower using the arc reactor? That's very interesting. And Tony Stark didn't even do that until he was in his 40s. So even if you pick option 2 and they're both privileged, but you just say that Tony is so much more privileged than Riri, if you're looking at this one as well, it doesn't seem to be the case. She's like 2 decades ahead of Tony Stark. So this resentment towards Tony Stark doesn't make any sense to me at any angle. Now let's move on. Let's talk about motivation. Okay, Riri got kicked out of MIT for selling assignments, injuring a professor, and overstaying her grant like we just mentioned. She chose to work on her suit instead of doing her own coursework because she didn't want to settle for a boring multi-million, possibly billion-dollar job, right? She wants to build something undeniable, like an Iron Man suit, like one that Tony Stark built 2 decades ago. I just don't understand her thought process here. She's focused too much on building the suit because she doesn't just want like a run-of-the-mill job or whatever she thinks. But once the suit is completed, then what? She reveals the suit, and then what does she think is going to happen other than dozens upon dozens of CEOs of tech companies wanting to work with her or work for her, giving her a blank check for whatever she decides to make next, or even Pepper Potts herself personally giving her a job offer for Stark Industries because she is the only person to build what Tony Stark had built. That's the reasonable result of what she's doing here. And she's not doing her coursework to avoid what's going to happen regardless. It's like she's the classic book smart, zero street smarts type, where it's like, once you break down what she's doing, there's no actual logic behind it. She's one of those like dumb smart people for sure, where it's like, what do you expect after this? What is your goal after this? Once you start getting into it, everything she says just falls apart. It's like she's cosplaying as a struggle story instead of actually being a struggle story. And it just doesn't work. You can't sympathize with the character. You don't care about what the character is saying because you're looking around and you're like, what you're saying is not true at all. Now, I'm not going to talk about this in every review because most of the time I don't think it's intentional. I'm not going to be one of those reviewers. But in Ironheart, it kind of feels like it is, so I do want to mention it. Even if all of this is intentional and the main character is complex and we're not supposed to agree with everything she does and says and is at times hypocritical, I think it's just quite the very, very bold decision to finally do something like this, where the lead is a black woman and one of her motivations is dwarfing a privileged white man. It's like they're setting themselves up for failure because the show is not terribly well written with fleshed out characters and a great plot. At several times, it's nonsensical. So it's unfortunate to me to top it off with some virtue signaling, which is undoubtedly just going to help create a further divide. It would have worked if we followed Riri really fighting from the bottom to get opportunities, right? Then that virtue signaling would just be part of the plot and we would have this tangible story that shows what the character says happens to people like her. But instead, we meet her in an already highly privileged position as she complains about not being privileged, meaning, like the dumb people that these social messages are meant to, break through to people. These people are instead going to look at a below than average show topped with this social issue and then lump all of it together as being awful. And then, because their brain don't work like that, they think because the show doesn't work overall, they think the show doesn't work because of the social issue that they included in it. Again, like I said, it's just unfortunate that they included that because it just, it doesn't help things. Like I said, I'm not going to talk about that every single time something like that comes up, but this is a very specific case. I had to acknowledge it because it just sucks. But let's end on a high note, shall we? Mephisto. Dude, he's finally here. He shows up in the final episode and immediately brings this dark charisma to the screen. He's manipulative, calculating, dangerously smooth. Very nice, very nice. I love the whole Dormammu bit where, the hood is usually connected or has ties to Dormammu. So I like how they played with that idea since Dormammu was already established in the MCU, but then they flip it and say, no, it's actually Mephisto. That was some cool world building they got, or not world, but I guess world building, where it's you're playing with the universe that you've already established and are able to create interactions based off of those. So it's cool to see. It's fun. Also, I loved when he's like, oh yeah, that Forbes 100 richest list? Yeah, I made deals with, all of them. I'm like, oh my God, this guy's cooking. I do have one question though. All right, so if he's making those deals, right? At first, I thought what they were going to do with the show is Parker was getting all those scars from wearing the hood. I thought the hood was the one causing the scars. But it was he had to keep wearing the hood in order to have the powers. But with Riri getting it at the end of the show, it's just because she made the deal with Mephisto. The deal is what causes the scars, right? How are all these celebrities hiding those scars? They must be very good at hiding them. I mean, it'd be funny if later on they tie it to a joke to where it's yeah, that's why celebrities are always getting plastic surgery, cover that stuff up. That would be funny. If not though, it's funny to think about damn, that's crazy. Because just in this show, when we see Parker, it stems from on the back. So he's able to hide it when he has a shirt on. But when Clown, I think it was Clown saying, oh yeah, I saw him at a party one time shirtless. He was hot, but also he was scaly. So it started from his back, started to expand towards his face. But then by that point, he couldn't hide it all. He was awful at hiding it. Where he was walking up, I believe, the scene with his dad. He's like, what's on your face? Right? He was not able to hide it. So it's funny to think about, all these celebrities. I guess that's how much money they have. They're just incredibly good at hiding it to where nobody has pointed that out before. I thought that was really funny. But Mephisto, I'm happy he's here. He's very good at saying the right thing at the exact right time to get you to, you know, make a deal with him. I like that a lot. I'm excited to see more of him. I hope he pops up before Secret Wars, man. I feel like, you know, the past year or so, you know, the MCU is finally starting to cook, set some actual stuff up. You know, with Kingpin, now we got Mephisto. We finally established like the new Avengers. We're starting to actually see some puzzle pieces get placed down. But now, you know, it's kind of, you know, it's a little depressing, right? Because I don't think they're going to follow up on a lot of these, except for, you know, Kingpin doing the Daredevil, but, you know, that's like an isolated thing. I don't think they're really going to follow up with this stuff until like around or even after Secret Wars, and that's 2 years away still. Because I don't know, I don't think Mephisto's going to show up in Doomsday or Secret Wars or whatever, so it's like, man, are you telling me I possibly got to wait 3 years to see Mephisto again? I don't know, man, I like him a lot. I want to see him sooner. I don't know, that's just something to think about, I guess. Something else to think about though. Leave me a like on this review and drop me a comment with your thoughts on Ironheart, whether you loved it, hated it, and also let me know what you agreed with and what you didn't in terms of my review. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next review, which is most likely going to be Superman. I know it's not Marvel, but I'm going to see it, so I might as well review it. The next Marvel one, of course, Fantastic Four, which I'm also very excited for. Are we safe? I don't know.